Hey, everybody. Hey, lovely community of online business managers. I am going live in case you haven't noticed. And I wanted to pop in here because we have been getting a ton of questions all around client onboarding. So I thought, you know what? Let's pop in here. Let's pop into our YouTube channel if you're watching on YouTube, or in our Confident OBM Facebook group if you're watching on Facebook. Welcome to our community. If you aren't a subscriber yet and you are on YouTube, please click that notification bell and subscribe to our channel so you can get notified, because we drop and or go live every week on YouTube. So today we are here, just kind of getting into the notion of client onboarding and what that looks like. And I wanted to give you guys my simple steps for client onboarding and what the things that I think are really key and really important, especially this year when you are onboarding clients. Because in case you missed last time I went live, I talked about trends, OBM trends. And naturally, as our world is becoming, it's like people are catching on to the OBM, right? They're like, this is a really great profession. This is a great career. So naturally, we need to do what we can to differentiate ourselves from the competition and all that good stuff. And part of that is through having a really stellar client experience. And that really starts with onboarding. So before I even get into the whole spiel of the things that you guys want to include in your onboarding process as online business managers, I really just want to reiterate here how important it is to give a really stellar client experience as an online business manager, because one of the most important things, and oftentimes gets overlooked naturally, but one of the most important things is trust. And relationships with our OBM clients are really built on trust. And if you've, been in a situation where maybe you haven't had a great ending with a client, and I mean, I think that's part of the territory, to be honest, but part of the thing that you really want to instill right from the get-go is this trust. And in order to deliver trust, you have to make sure that your onboarding process is something that you have really thought about and considered, and put all the little magical sprinkles inside so that your client knows that working with you was, not only the right decision, right? Because I hope that as online business managers, we're not a small investment for our client, right? We're coming in to a business that needs this sort of managerial, energy in the business. So with that in mind, you coming into a client's business is ever more important to make sure that you're really coming in from a place where you're considering the client's experience. And a lot of the times, especially for new OBMs, this is sort of just an afterthought. Maybe you're very much just kind of like, in it for the kill. You want to kind of land the client via a discovery call, or you want to just kind of get in there. But reality is that, if you can retain your OBM clients for as long as possible, that is just really good for your bottom line revenue as a business owner. Okay, so in today's live, we're going to have some time at the end for Q&A. If you guys have any questions and you're catching me, unfortunately, my son confiscated my phone because he's like, well, if you're doing your live, then, I'm going to take your phone. I was like, all right. So I'm only checking messages on YouTube. So if you do want to join us on YouTube, that just Google YouTube Sarah Noquette, and you'll definitely find us live. And you can post any questions that you have in the comments here for me live. So if you guys have any general questions about client onboarding, feel free to leave them in the chat. But I just wanted to give the framework here that trust is a really significant piece. And that is why we are emphasizing this onboarding. So I think that also a very clear distinction between what it means to have a client intake process versus a client onboarding process. And when we're talking about intaking a client, we're talking about all the things that lead up to before the client has paid and signed their contract. So intake has to do with, the discovery call. It has to do with things like how you follow up with a lead to get them to book a discovery call. It's like all that sort of sales process stuff. This onboarding process happens at the point where the client has signed their contract and made payment. So they are officially a client. So now it's time to onboard them in a way that really demonstrates value for the client. And oftentimes this has to happen very, very early on in the relationship. So, like, what should you include in your process? And why is it so important to do this with clients from the get go as an online business manager? So, when it comes to onboarding, there's a few things that are really, really important to consider from and I will say here that it's extremely important as an online business manager because as I mentioned, clients are investing in a management piece in their business. They want to make sure they've made the right decision. They want to make sure that there's some longevity in working with you long term. So the first thing is, making sure that you give them a very personalized welcome experience, okay? And a lot of the times, especially inside of OBM school and how we really encourage our students to welcome new clients is through a strategy session, right? And through a proper experience around assets, right? So, a big part of the first things that you're going to want to collect for your client is really making sure that you know what's going on in their business and what the strategy is. Okay? So, a lot of the times, and I will say this here, and of course, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. But because a lot of us are coming from a background where maybe you've been a virtual assistant before, or maybe you're a graphic designer or some other sort of professional in the online space or the offline space providing services, you know, at the OBM level, when you are onboarding an OBM client and you're getting really familiar with their business, there's so much to unpack there. So you have on one hand the client themselves and all that comes with the personality of the client, and that's one whole thing. And then you have understanding the actual business. And actually the business is your client and the business is what you are there to really manage, although for better or worse, the client is a piece of that as well sometimes. But when it comes to really getting clear around the assets in the business, you want to really be 100% familiar with what are their funnels? What are they selling? What is their strategy around sales and social media? And really starting to familiarize yourself with what it means to be in that business. And every business is very unique. And just like as you can imagine in corporate, if you've had an experience of corporate or any job for that matter, there's always like a learning curve to learning a new job. And it's especially true with becoming an online business manager. It will definitely take you some time to really understand what goes into that business, what the funnels are like, what's the strategy for social media, what platforms are we on, what are the different brands inside of this business, what are the different programs that we sell, what's the ideal client like. So making sure that you're taking stock of assets and you are collecting and auditing what is happening in that business is really important because it's going to really, again, instill trust in your client that they've made the right decision to work with you. So when you're auditing and you're collecting information and you're asking the team questions, and hopefully, and it's funny because this is really fresh in my mind because we just did this yesterday as part of our accreditation program, is we were talking a lot about auditing and the first team audit that you take when you get into someone's business. And for many, many years, for me as an online business manager, I just never wanted to really put a lot of work on my client's plate at the beginning. Like I'm a real, people pleaser and I wanted to make it a really seamless, smooth, comfortable process. But when you're onboarding an OBM client, you really do have to get down and dirty in the ins and outs of their business. And a lot of the time, it's just not going to be pretty and it's not going to feel smooth and it's going to feel like work for you and for the client. So when you are onboarding and you're giving that experience, you have to really make sure that you've done your homework. And most of the times, there's a degree of due diligence that happens in the initial discovery call, in the initial intake process that I was speaking to at the beginning, where, there's this distinction between intake and onboarding. And yes, during your intake process, you might have come across a lot of like the bits and pieces and kind of what makes that business kind of work for your client. But here we are in the onboarding, we are getting down and dirty in the actual funnels, the actual strategies. What are the goals? And a lot of that has to do with auditing, one of which is the team audit, which I was really diving into yesterday. So it's so fresh in my mind and I was excited to talk about this. But doing a team audit and actually looking at what your client does on a recurring basis. So it could be things that recur weekly, daily, monthly, yearly. What does your client actually do? And actually giving, I know, shocker. This might shock some of you, but you're going to be giving your client and their team homework. And for those of you catching this live or maybe catching the replay and you're thinking about hiring an online business manager, I will be the first one to tell you that it is work. If you thought bringing on that VA was work, if you thought that bringing on the graphic designer was work in your business, and look, I'm not going to downplay team onboarding and offboarding. We're not talking about that today, but it is, you know, can be overwhelming. But when you're actually onboarding an OBM into your business, you need to make time for it. You need to make time for audits. Need to make time for questions. You may need to make time for maybe feeling uncomfortable about somebody encroaching on your quote unquote personal business space, because oftentimes, our business is, for lack of better term of describing it, our baby, and we love our business. And yes, it might not be perfect, but it's ours. But when you're onboarding an OBM client as an online business manager, sometimes we overlook that the client is so personally invested in their business. And, for a lot of us, we want to make it all nice and smooth and organized. And while it does have to be to a degree, there's also a degree of discomfort that the client will experience. And as an OBM, you need to be aware of, and you need to hold space for the client as they, go through their own audits and maybe aren't so happy with, for example, how they've been spending their time or what tasks they're still responsible for, or, all the projects and goals that they have that are maybe a little bit overwhelming. So you want to make sure that you are definitely collecting and auditing and getting, the client involved in what's happening, and just recognizing that, yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, your client might be triggered by some of the questions that you're asking, but it's really important to recognize that that is what is instilling the long-term trust. And that is what's giving you ultimately the information, which brings me to my next really important point of creating a plan of action. Again, very different from some of the other online type roles in our industry, like a virtual assistant, graphic designer. I don't know why those are always the two that come to my mind, but you really need to create a plan. Now, inside our accelerator program, inside of OBM school, one of the things that I literally have created an entire module on is a dating project. And well, not everybody takes me up on this notion of dating before, getting serious with the client. If you're approaching a client and maybe you're onboarding them and you haven't done a dating project, and that's fine, it's not for everybody, but I will say that it is ever more important to create a plan for what that first 90 days looks like working with your OBM client. Because again, this is an opportunity to instill trust, to show that you are aware of the greater goals and strategy in the business, because you have been having these conversations and collecting and auditing and doing all the things for your client. So the next big step is creating this 90-day plan, or it could even be a 30-day plan. but there needs to be a plan in place so that you can essentially know what your path is working with that client, and you can be measuring, and maybe you're setting some KPIs, key performance indicators for yourself, like brownie points if you are. But if you're not, you're still very much getting on that same page with your client and creating a plan that can literally bring to life whatever goals they have in mind, what are the projects that maybe they've sort of left to the wayside because they haven't had the bandwidth. But that plan, and running that plan effectively by the client, like, don't create a plan and then like keep it quiet, or let the client into, I've got a child trying to break into my office. Not right now, mommy's in a meeting, honey. Or chat in an hour, okay, honey? Okay, no, you can't, sweetheart. Okay. Now, another tip for us OBMs, here's a tip. Use the lock on your office door when you tell your children that you're having a live and they still infiltrate. Okay, so back to where we were with creating a plan. So it's likely not that comfortable, or maybe in the past you've kind of created your own plans and put them into your own project management tool. You definitely want to bring your client into the plan, which brings me to the next point, which is really communicating the plan to your client and then having ongoing ways of communicating. So typically, when we work with new clients as online business managers, there's likely a lot of little things that aren't exactly perfect in the business. For example, a lot of the times there might not be a project management tool in place. Sometimes, there's no consistent way of communicating across team members, meaning, some people communicate on Facebook Messenger. Sometimes it's on a project management tool. Sometimes it's Slack. Sometimes it's other mode, like a text message, but streamlining the places where you're communicating with your client, and then actively putting things in place to have a very open line of communication from the get-go is, again, taking me right back to this very simple concept of trust. There's nothing more disheartening to an online business manager client than silence from their online business manager. I mean, there's a degree of like, but you want to be able to communicate. You want to have a place where you're communicating what you're working on, where you can ask questions in a very controlled sense. And that might be as simple as having a weekly meeting with your client, or a weekly check-in on your online communication tool like Slack. And I will leave below here, obmschool.com/tools, all the sort of technology that we recommend for communicating with clients and what's worked for us in our own agency. But the communication piece is really something that you almost need to like etch into your project management tool, and remember to communicate to your clients, because I know my personality is one where I can sometimes almost be this lone wolf who's just like head down, getting the work done. But you definitely need to communicate what you're working on with your clients. You need to be asking questions in a very, very controlled sense, meaning, you're not all over the place. You're not asking questions on all these different modes of communication. You got to keep it really simple and clean for your client so that they know how to communicate and get in touch with you, and vice versa, that you know as well. And then, of course, naturally, it brings me to my next point, which is actually checking in with your clients. So, you might you might have a place where you communicate for different various projects, but then you might have this place where you are communicating, your beginning and end of day reporting. And this is something that um, we really encourage students to leverage, and we have a whole standard operating procedure around end of day and beginning of day reporting. It's really just about like saying, "Hey, I'm online," or "Hey, I'm offline now, leave me alone," right? Like, and having a very clear set of boundaries and expectations, because truthfully, that's what this all really comes down to, is clear boundaries and expectations, so you don't feel like you are working yourself to the bone. And so your client also feels like they're getting a really, really great online business manager and they feel like their business is in good hands. So when you can be very transparent about checking in and letting people know what you're working on, it's just going to lead to like this beautiful experience for your client. They're not going to want to live without you. So when it comes to this client check-in, we really encourage beginning and end of day reporting. And the important thing too, and the thing that I wanted to mention here as well is, your welcome pack as an online business manager is something that you definitely want to reiterate when you're onboarding a client. Certainly when you are intaking your client. Do you hear my son knocking on the door? Certainly when you're intaking your client, you should be giving them a welcome kit and familiarizing them with your hours and how you can be communicated with and so on and so forth. But when it comes to onboarding, you also want to reiterate what's in your welcome kit and what that looks like. So for example, some of the things that we include in our welcome kit are our hours of work, right? So, if it's 9 to 5 Eastern time, these are the hours I'm online and your client has a 20-hour retainer with you. Well, you're not working from 9 to 5 every day. So maybe there's clear specific points where you're working on client Susie's work, right? And like clear times where you're working on client Jack's work and like they know when you're available and online for their business. So it makes it very nice and clean in a way. So checking in at those hours and being very consistent is also going to instill trust, but also boundaries and expectations around when you can be reached. Because one of the things that we often hear from our community is, I've kind of let my boundaries and expectations kind of fall to the wayside. And now my client thinks that like I'm available 24/7. And also, the thing that I want to mention here too is like, it is so okay for your OBM client to send you messages at 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. or 5 in the morning when they're in their creative zone. That's fine. It doesn't mean that you need to reply back, right? You need to kind of hold yourself together until your hours of operation and then you can check in and report back and do all the things that you know, your client is asking or requesting or wanting feedback on. But again, it's up to you to really put down the lines around your boundaries and expectations as an online business manager because we work very closely with our clients, and in a way we're almost partnering with our clients. And that's why this is even more important to make sure that you're really clear on what that looks like. Now, the next thing that I want to mention here, and then I'll let my son come in so you guys can see how cute he is. But the next thing that I want to mention here is that when it comes to onboarding, like any system in your business, you have to refine and improve. So you might be a new OBM, so you might have some semblance of what it looks like to collect an audit and create a plan and maybe you're sort of putting together a task list for onboarding. Like that might include, making sure that you save the contract, making sure that the payment has been made before you start the onboarding, and then making sure that you're delivering ongoing end of day, beginning of day reportings, that you're actively communicating, that you are actively doing the audit at the beginning. But you have to also remember that it's up to you to kind of refine and improve your onboarding system with clients. Okay. Like things are always changing, technology changes, and you have to be not reinventing the wheel every time you're onboarding a new client. Like it should literally be like, oh, client signed the contract, and then maybe your Dubsado or your Honeybook triggers a task list in your project management tool to do all of these things that you do as part of your onboarding. Hey, your onboarding system, as it's more and more refined, might even include sending your client a mug, or some kind of cute little thing when they've signed on for a long-term retainer with you. Okay. And if you're thinking to yourself, as I'm saying that, oh, I would never do something like that because, my clients don't pay enough, then maybe you need to raise your pricing so that you can afford to bake some of this goodness into your white glove client experience with a new online business management client. So with that in mind, I haven't been looking at your comments because I was like, I'm going to get distracted like I do. But I want to really, so my little guy left finally. He was like, now he's gone. Um, so let me just look here. So Eben, hey Eben. Eben is one of the incredible students inside of our accreditation and our accelerator program. Yes, hiring an OBM is work. So those of you who are looking to hire an OBM, it's not like I mean, by all means, we want to encourage our students, especially inside of OBM school, to like onboard very, with as much love and trust as possible, but also really recognizing that, yeah, it's work. It is work. Yeah, I love that you would do a dating plan, Desiree. I love that because a dating project is really going to help you to get a better feel for if you want to onboard the client long term. So even if you're doing a dating project with the client, you are still onboarding that client before you have a dating project with them. And to be honest, you're doing a lot of the things that you would do when you are onboarding a full-on retainer client. So with that in mind, price your dating projects accordingly to bake in the fact that there is a degree of onboarding there too. Oh, I missed this. I missed you. I like that. Lots of people who are enjoying these tips, lots of giggles. Are you laughing at my son who's like literally infiltrating this meeting? And of course, I wouldn't be, yeah, you're so funny. Okay. So yes, waiting for some more questions to come in here. So this is our live week. We have a live bi-weekly Q&A. And if you guys are watching and are not subscribers yet to our channel, then please go ahead and subscribe because we drop these lives and also other YouTube videos every week that have to do with things around having an online business, whether you're managing your own online business or you're looking to hire an online business manager. I think that, like, as you see, I have kids and we have to really make this work. So team is kind of where it's at. And having an online business manager on your team is a really incredible thing. And yes, so here's another question. Do you include onboarding time as hours towards your retainer package? So Taylor, this is a really fantastic question. And I would actually say no. So onboarding time to me and what I recommend to students inside of OBM school is non-billable hours. That is something that I consider to be like internal, just like how I don't bill my clients for end of day, beginning of day reporting, or, like some of the things that I do internally in my business. To me, the onboarding is an internal thing. That being said, if I'm having a planning strategy session as part of my onboarding with a client, then I'm absolutely billing for that. But like saving the contract, which is more like part of the intake, but like doing my due diligence is actually also something that is billable time to me. So even as I'm saying these things out loud, Taylor, a lot of the non-billable hours are more reserved towards the intake, right? Because the client hasn't paid yet. So the discovery call, but there are things that you will do with your onboarding that will be very unique to your business. Like, for example, sending the gift to a client, or you know, I'm just trying to think of something that would be non-billable, because if I'm doing like things like team audit, billable, strategy call, billable, Sarah doing her due diligence around the client funnels and what is inside the client's business, those are all billable things. So onboarding in that regard is a billable thing. But if there's things that you're doing that are sort of like out of that scope, like maybe there's trying to think of something. So yeah, it is, onboarding time is very much billable towards your retainer package. And that's why, especially in the first month of onboarding, when you're setting up those systems and when you're doing team audits, that's all billable. Definitely. Okay, here's another one. Rue, is there any way we can purchase an onboarding checklist for service providers? I'm a tax accountant and my onboarding process is not where I want it to be. Unfortunately, we don't have an onboarding checklist specifically for a tax accountant, but we absolutely have stuff inside um, for OBMs. But it's so interesting that you say that because I love that you are focused on your own onboarding process, like onboarding team members, or is it onboarding your own clients? Because I mean, it's not probably not too different. But I imagine, Rue, that you have an onboarding process and maybe you need to just practice documenting and refining or heading on over to our obmschool.com/directory and finding some stellar OBM who can help you get your onboarding process where it needs to be. So that's what I would say there. Because again, I'm sure there's very unique as a tax accountant. My father was an accountant, so I know how sometimes complex and sensitive these things can be. So I imagine there's probably a lot of things that are needing to be considered here. So I recommend that you perhaps investigate what it would look like to onboard an OBM to help you systematize some of these stuff. So Shanice, I would say that the kickoff is billable. Yeah, it is billable. And that's not the discovery call. So I think you might be referring to like a kickoff strategy session or a kickoff planning session once the client has secured services with you. Then, yeah, absolutely. That's billable. Oh, yeah, onboarding clients. Okay, that's good. Yeah, so definitely you definitely wanna investigate and again, you can head on over to our directory, and I'm gonna do, like, a shameless plug because our students inside of OBM school are amazing. So even I will say the lovely Eben, who left her comment beforehand, she's a really fantastic OBM that you will find on our OBM school directory. I don't see any other, of our students in the chat here right now, but you can definitely feel free to, here I am. Here I'm an incredible OBM school OBM who's accredited, but our accredited students end up on our obmschool.com directory. And if you are listening here, and I love it if you are, because I'm like an entrepreneur to myself. I'm all about streamlining my own system. So Rue, you definitely want to work with an OBM who can sprinkle all that goodness into your own business and give your clients an absolutely white glove experience that is very much aligned with your business and your brand. So, chef's kiss, as everybody's saying these days. And I will as well. I love it, guys. So, client onboarding, I think that brings us sort of to the end. I don't see any other questions coming through, but I hope that this has been a really kind of informative session. We're going to be doing these again, like I mentioned, every other week for a live Q&A. So join us here. Don't forget to hit subscribe. And this is really going to be for you if you are an online business manager or other online service provider, like Rue mentioned that she's a tax advisor. But I'm also very much on that side of like, I'm an entrepreneur too. Like I am also wanting to streamline and systematize and do all the things. So I get it from like an managing your own online business. And also too, I will say here as well, guys, like all of you are online business owners, like really own the entrepreneurial spirit and make sure that you start to really put your client experience at the forefront because, and this is sort of like the drum roll of why this is ultimately so important, because it's not just client retention that I mentioned, it's also them referring you because they've had such a lovely, wonderful, incredible experience with you. Thank you, lovely humans. I love that Eben and Rue have found each other. That makes me very happy. And I wish you guys a wonderful Wednesday. I will be back here usually on Tuesdays, but we're here on Wednesday because I had something yesterday. And I'm just really, really, really excited. And again, Margaret, I see your question coming up. If you want to start working with us inside of OBM school, the best place I miss you too, Evan. The best place to go is to our accelerator over at obmschool.com/accelerator. That is a a great place to start. And if you are already working at the OBM role, which you mentioned, Margaret, I would head on over to obmschool.com/certification, because we are getting ready to launch our next cohort. And if you're already working with clients as an OBM without the formal training, you are definitely going to want to head on over there, because at the end of January, on the 31st, and actually in 2 weeks from now, right here, we're going to be doing an open house, which I actually haven't announced yet, but here, I let the cat out of the bag. But we're going to be doing an open house and an early bird offer for our accreditation program, which was, formerly called certification, but that we are going to be announcing, some changes internally in the coming weeks. Nothing too big, but my feeling is that the credentials and our accreditation program is like amazing and just so top notch. I mean, Eben can speak for that as well, because she is here on this live. I just really, really want you guys to know that, like, part of being a really awesome um, online business manager is just really owning your own entrepreneurial spirit and, like, experience the client experience and all that good stuff. So I'd love to work with you, Margaret. Um, oh, I love that you have a bachelor's in management. I got my MBA as well. And I'm so here for you. So definitely reach out to me, send an email to support@obmschool.com so that we can make sure that we get you all the information that you need. And guys, onwards and upwards. It's just a really incredible year to be an OBM. And I wish you guys all the success in the world. Yes, awesome. So yeah, I love that. More structure. And yes. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you, guys. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. I will see you back here soon. And make sure you hit subscribe if you are watching on YouTube. If not, go to Sarah Noked OBM on Google that, find us on YouTube, and subscribe, because that's what this year is all going to be about, is just tons of video and transparency around being a really successful online service provider. Take care, everybody. I'll see you soon.